Greetings, it's Awesome Authors Time once again. My friends out there in Salem and Kaiserland, I'm Lee Coyne, your host for the last 3-4 years. We're privileged today to have with us Jan Jackson in her colorful jacket there. And Jan is a writer, a freelance writer that's conquered many fields within the realm of writing. And I guess it all began back, were you born in Rainier?
I grew up in Rainier,
Okay.
went to Rainier High School, and until I went off to the University of Oregon to be a music major, which I didn't end up being a music major. I ended up being a writer and a tour operator and
Lyrics, empiric lyrics.
all of that.
Mm-hmm. What, I have not been to Rainier. I know it's somewhat north of Portland, northwest, I guess it is, as the Columbia River takes a bend up toward, well, ultimately Astoria and Warrenton in that area.
It's 50 miles north of Portland and 50 miles east of Astoria. So it's right where the river takes a bend.
Mm-hmm. So what's it like growing up there? What is it, an agricultural area? Is it semi-urbanized? How would you describe a street scene?
It's just a little town filled, it had 1,280 people.
That's kind of small.
Still has 1,280 people living on small farms.
Farms, mainly, okay.
It's,
not ranch
I
houses.
was related to most of them.
Mm-hmm.
My mother had 10 in her family, and my father had 5, and they were all right there.
Wow.
So I wasn't a good person to gossip to because I was probably related to whoever somebody was wanting to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned farms. Did you grow up on a farm?
I grew up in the country. The only thing I had, or we had, was a few Banty chickens. And I've written for the Capital Press newspaper for the last 25 years.
You know Mr. Sampson, then?
Oh, yes. So I don't know why I thought that's what I wanted to write for, is agriculture, but I love it.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. He may come on the show again soon. He was here once. They're very nice.
Oh, he's a great, he's a
fun guy.
He's a great guy. He's a good friend of mine, and he's a good editor. Good man to work for.
You like him. So tell us, when you got started, do you remember what your first article feature ever was, or way back with some of the early ones?
Yes, because I got started because I was public relations director for the Salem YWCA, an adult director. That meant I wrote press releases. I wrote their monthly newsletter.
Any speeches?
I wrote whatever it was I needed to write, and that's would have been in the middle 60s. I started in 1964.
That would have been the Lyndon Johnson years.
And after doing that is when I started when I took my first writing class. And that was the class that shaped my entire writing career, and it was called Special Purpose Writing.
What's that all
And that's
about?
writing, and my writing today is by purpose. There's a reason I'm writing what I'm writing, and I write to that reason.
Right on.
And I can do it in very few words.
So when you started, what was your main goal in writing? How did you want to present your style?
My goal was to talk people into falling in love with the YWCA and signing up for the classes and programs that the YWCA had.
Which
And I wrote
preceded the Kroc Center by many years.
Right.
Yeah. How do you, well, the thing is, I've learned from public speaking that you really are talking to different audiences, and you got to find the common denominator that could reach to all of them. You don't address to a kid the same way that you address to an adult and all. So,
I determine who I'm writing to and what it is I want them to do with what I'm presenting to them.
so it's salesmanship through the word.
It's salesmanship, whether it's writing something that will enable them to get more pleasure out of something they're doing or will do, to educate them, to try to get them to rethink what they're doing and do something else.
So, yeah.
I'm not a fiction writer, for instance, to just create. I like telling, I can tell your story, but I can't make up a story.
Okay. Let's reminisce. Let's make believe you're still writing for the YMCA, even though I think it's
You
kind
got
of
to keep
disappeared.
that second letter right side up. It's YWCA.
I know. YWCA for women, as in Me Too, women. A little bit.
That's past my day.
Okay, I know. Okay, let's say that you were trying to do a pitch to recruit more members to sign up. What program or what approach would you use to entice people to come to the membership desk and inquire further?
Well, as far as the YWCA goes, there is no longer a
I know,
YWCA
it's
here
the
in Salem.
Building Blocks building.
But if there were, it would be a place where women could come and hopefully meet their needs, either physical activities, discussion groups, education, new skills. Depending on the program and the person that the program was for is how I would then write that story. I would try to reach the person that that program was hoping to reach. So
when you have
very
a newsletter,
subjective.
when you have a newsletter, you probably have 5 or 6 or more different feature stories,
Right.
each pitched to a different activity,
And
different audience.
sometimes I would feature who was teaching it or leading it.
Mhm.
And that changes people's lives when they, well, in fact, the YWCA changed my life because the first time I ever went to the YWCA was to exercise. And I was there for just a few times, and they needed a piano player because in those days, that was before boom boxes.
Ah, yes.
They needed a piano player to play for the people who were exercising. And they paid $5 a time. Now, that was pretty big money in 1963.
Oh, yeah.
And I said to myself, I could do that. So I did that and was there in the circle and heard about a receptionist job at the front desk. And I thought, I could do that. So while I was doing that, the executive director asked me to take the job of adult program director and public relations director. So like Topsy, it just grew. That's how I got into writing, because I did not write as a young person.
So when you were in school, high school or college or middle school, did you do any special writing projects in those days?
None.
Not in the school newspaper, any of that stuff, no?
Not until I already took the job to write did I learn how to write. It was easy for me because by that time I had done a great deal of reading. And that's my philosophy. About how to write is read, 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 and write, write, write.
So
So
you-
I just jumped in and started in, and obviously I had to learn a lot. And so that's where the classes came in from Portland State over at Haystack, Cannon Beach. And a woman by the name of Gail Tyser, who still is in business as a public
Hi out there,
relations.
Gail, if you see us on TV.
I hope Gail can see me because she's the one that set the course
Yeah.
for my life as a writer.
Let me just, okay. So tell me, give us a sample of your writing and give us a prelude to why you wrote what you wrote, Jan.
Well, I have a story that's on Country Traveler Online. I'm very pro forest management. I do a lot of forest management stories.
Yeah.
I do agriculture stories. I just do features on people I find interesting anywhere. And I have a pretty good sense of humor. And so it seemed very funny to me when I heard about the Nye brothers in Rainier who love to catch and release on the Clatskanie River, catching salmon. But they went down to the river this last time and there were no salmon, there were no fish.
Cool.
The reason I thought that was story-worthy is because the logging company, KC Veneta, whose ground that the river runs through, between Veneta Brothers Logging and the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Columbia Soil and Water Conservation District and the Lower Cumber River Watershed Council collectively spent $13,000 following the Forest Practices Act of 1972, spent $13,000 on cleaning up and preparing that river so that the salmon come back, and they did come back.
See?
And everyone was thrilled,
Did you have-
especially the otters
Did you have a
who
salmon
moved
bake?
in and ate all the fish. So my last line in the story is, either way, everyone was thrilled to see the coho salmon back in the Clatskanie River. None were more thrilled than the otters.
Right.
I have stories that I
So you got
would
three
have
groups.
taken my travelers, told my travelers about the little statue that now is in Esquin of Joe the sea lion, because after almost 80 years, he's back in statue form. He,
Is that made out of wood?
no, it's made out of something that won't rust,
Like resin.
but it's not a fine metal of any kind. But this woman remembers Joe the sea lion as a child, and then people didn't like it there because he was too messy and too bothersome. So they hauled him out to sea, and of course he died and washed up, and so they've got a statue now. So if I were still doing tours, I would drive them down so that they could meet Joe the sea lion, even though sea lions aren't that popular
Yeah.
right now.
If Joe could talk in human terms, what do you think Joe would be saying?
Well, Joe would be happy because he was very social. And in his day, thousands of people would come to see him. And then that was over. And now, at least hundreds of people at a time are visiting his likeness. So Joe would think he was happy to come back to town, I'm sure. Sure of it.
I'm going to ask you a sort of kind of innocuous question. Along the way in your writing career, what were some of the speed bumps that you had to overcome, some of the challenges that made your career not exactly super smooth?
Well, I don't think my writing career will ever be super smooth, partly because every story I do is a brand new story. It's a brand new theme, a brand new market, a brand new message. And I've never lost the absolute fear of being in print.
Mm-hmm.
You can't take it back. So I toil. I'm a good editor. I did edit this wonderful book on Snap, who was based on OR7, the wolf that traveled 1,200 miles from Eastern Oregon down through California and back into Southern Oregon to find a mate. I'm a good editor. I'm a good self-editor, but I edit and edit and edit and sleep on it and get up and reread it and edit some more and then fact check it.
You live here in Salem now?
Yes.
Okay.
I moved to Salem in 1959.
Oh, wow. Now, are you aware that every Thursday at 12:30 there's a writers group in the plaza room of our library?
Yes. As a writer and as an aged writer, my teachers are my editors, and I do what I have to do what I have to do. If I were to create something, I might be right down there doing it. I do belong to Willamette Writers, and I go to the monthly meetings at the Salem Library. Even though the topics are often things that don't apply to me, I always get some
benefit,
great thing out of it.
Okay.
But I don't write fiction. I don't write my story. I write for such a specific purpose. Well, I might have to think about that. I am writing a cookbook, and I'm calling it One Pan Annie Cooks for One. And the fun part of that is I am One Pan Annie. My friends are laughing because I've never believed in taking any longer to cook something than it takes to eat it. So they're dying to see what this cookbook is going to be like.
Why don't you consider then, since Thanksgiving is the time of feasting, if you want to be our guest on the first Wednesday, I think November 3rd, and talk about your cookbook if it's ready by that time, to share some of the recipes, and we'll...
The book I would like to read because he was so kind to talk about my editing. This is the story based on OR7, but it's really a story about never giving up. And he's done a great job of providing definitions, Oregon place names, and it's a story about animals doing what animals do. And here's what he said in my behalf. I'm indebted to Jan Jackson, who wore herself out, keeping me from smelling every flower along the way. Now, I think that's a wonderful way of saying something nice about how I cut his book in about half. It's a wonderful book for kids.
So are you going to read an excerpt in the 4+ minutes we have remaining on our agenda?
Well, I would like to read something goofy. This is something I
Thanks,
wrote in 1989.
The name of the publication?
The Traveler's Times.
Traveler's Times.
And that's the way to get yourself published, is write for your own newspaper.
Is that still operating?
No. I retired in 1993. That's when I started writing for the Capitol Press and Oregon Coast Magazine and a number of agriculture magazines. This is a story, it's an interview I did with the statue of Abraham Lincoln in Lincoln City. And I called it Good Morning, Mr. Lincoln. The Traveler's Times says, Mr. Lincoln, I'm curious about you and why you're here. Do you mind if I ask you some questions? And he says, I don't know if I will know the answers, but I'd be pleased to try. Besides that, I like company. The Traveler's Times, you came from the Illinois prairies, which are very different from the wet and windy Oregon coast. Has it been tough to endure the salt air and moisture? No, I like it here. Let me tell you, when those blustery squalls are over and fresh air and new comes again, yes, I like it here very much. Now, I don't need to continue on, but this gives you the idea of kind of a frivolous way to tell people that when they're in Lincoln City, a beautiful statue of Lincoln is there. He was hauled there on a freight car from New Jersey.
My gosh.
But they couldn't get it through the tunnels between here and there, so they had to barge it to New York and then send it through Canada, take it off, put it on a truck in Portland, go along and raise the electrical wires on the way to Lincoln City. He came with a broken foot. They had to take that back and repair it.
Fix that,
So
quite a story.
It's also a statue where Lincoln does not, he's reading a book on his horse. And it was before he grew a beard, because he didn't grow a beard until a young girl suggested that he would look better if he had one. It's a beautiful statue. It's 1 block off Highway 101.
I remember,
between Dairy Queen and Barnacle Bills, and nobody knows it's there.
You mean they don't have a historical sign on 101? They should, really.
They just don't see it.
Okay, good.
I don't know if there's a sign now or not. Everybody I have ever taken to Lincoln City, trust me, they know it's there because I make them go see it.
Okay, good. Yeah, so next, I just came from Lincoln City area because I had a
It's right by the Elks Club. It's in the same parking lot as the Elks Club.
Yeah, I know the area. And next time, instead of gambling all your money away in a certain casino there,
have a chat.
Get a little historical flavor into your repertoire.
Have a little chat.
Okay. Well, I thank you very much. Closing question in about 20 seconds. Any advice for young authors just starting out?
My advice remains the same. Read, read, read.
Okay.
Write.
Okay, carry on. Thank you. If any of you have friends out there who are writers, journalists, whatever, get in touch with me, Lee Coyne at CCTV. Glad to have you on. Thanks again, Jan. Carry on.